we are completely redefining what we call social. The companies really smartly called this social media, right? And they gave us this really big promise, this golden promise of you are going to be more connected if you use these apps and these devices. And unfortunately, that isn't in the research. That is not what happened. It has disconnected us and polarized us more than ever before. And so it's a form of connection that is not by nature social or connective.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. It is so great to have you here. I have an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old, and it is interesting. And it is really interesting parenting in an era of the internet as it exists today. It's frankly interesting just existing in the internet era today. And there's so many questions about how do we parent in these times? How do we navigate these very, very interesting times as it relates to social media? And to help us figure that out, I am really excited today to bring you this conversation with Jake Ernst, who I first learned about because he spoke at my daughter's school, and I was like, I got to get this guy on the show and bring him to all of you, because he talks about the things that are the most challenging aspects of parenting in today's world. Let me tell you a little bit about Jake. He is a relational therapist, writer, and clinical director whose work sits right at the intersection of mental, emotional, and social health. Jake leads Straight Up Health, a family mental health clinic where he and his team support young people and their families through stress, anxiety, trauma, and all the messy real-life moments that come with growing up in a very fast, very wired world. Jake grew up in a big family in a small town, and he was that kid on the playground who naturally ended up helping other kids sort out their problems. A major loss in his teenage years, the death of his father, became a turning point that cemented his belief in the power of connection. Instead of shutting down, he turned that grief into a lifelong commitment to helping people feel less alone and more supported in their hardest moments. With over a decade of experience in the helping professions, Jake has become a trusted voice on what he calls MESH, mental, emotional, and social health. His work draws on the relational neuroscience and trauma-informed practice that he has been working on. And he's especially interested in how the world around us shapes the world inside of us, how our environments, relationships, and communities show up in our nervous systems, our stress responses, and our capacity for connection. You might know Jake as at MSW Jake on social media, as the co-host of the podcast This Isn't Therapy, or through his popular newsletter, Just Trying to Help. His ideas on connection, safety, and modern stress have been featured in outlets like Men's Health, Teen Vogue, Healthline, HuffPost, InStyle, and Pop Sugar. These are regular contributor to CTV News, the Toronto Star, and CBC podcasts. He's also an engaging speaker who's delivered talks and workshops for organizations like Google, Starbucks, RBC, Home Depot, Equifax, and HelloFresh, and was named one of 5 wellness professionals to watch by Toronto Life magazine. Jake really helped me to understand a lot better how I can help my kids to feel safe, how to keep everybody connected, but to do so in a healthy way in this very, very stressed out world. So I know this is huge for all of us. I know this is really important. In fact, this might be one of the most important topics that we discuss this year. So without any further delays, please enjoy this conversation with Jake Ernst. Jake Ernst, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you on the podcast. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I am really excited to be here, Greg. I feel like we already have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we were just like brainstorming before we jumped on, and there's so much around technology and relationships and the impact that it's having on all of us. I think that almost everybody listening would agree that they are slightly addicted in some way, shape, or form to these technologies. I've got a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. It is a very interesting time. It is a huge challenge as a parent. It's a challenge as a high performer to navigate these really strange times that we're in.
Yeah, it is. It's unprecedented times. And I know we're probably sick and tired of hearing about that, but I really do think that this is a really big moment for us as people, but also just with respect to our relationship with technology, right? We're all smartphone owners and all of us are app. It's highly relevant for sure.
So, from your perspective as a clinical social worker who's in this every single day, what are you seeing? Like, what in from your professional perspective is going on here? I just love your overview of this situation that we find ourselves in these days.
Yeah, I mean, let's zoom out so that we can zoom in on a few things. I think that the main thing I'm worried about right now is technology replacing our attachments with people. I do think a lot of ways technology has become a primary caregiver, primary attachment figure for a lot of kids and young people. And so we have to be clear about one thing, which is that parents are not just raising kids by themselves, they're also co parenting with the internet. And it turns out that the internet is a really lousy co parent.
Talk to me about this idea of co-parenting with the internet. Like, that's a mind-blowing concept.
I think back to my experience in 2019 when I opened up this clinic called Straight Up Health in Midtown Toronto. And I was working with this distractible 9-year-old boy, and I brought him out to the waiting room to deliver him back to his mom, who was sitting there at my waiting room table, sitting there with a baby on her lap and a smartphone in her hand. And I look over and I see this young girl, probably about 2 years old, and she is bent over the table scrolling on a magazine as if it's an iPad. And this was back in 2019. This is pre-pandemic stuff. And that was the first time where I realized, whoa, this technology stuff really has a hold on us and also is really fading in the formation of our key developmental milestones as young people. And so it was in that moment that I really started to pivot my work just away from working with a young boy and working with the entire family. Some key, really important things, starting with the basics, the foundational elements of relationships and attachment and child development. And then from there, I sort of, the pandemic obviously took hold, which really started to change our relationship with technology, meaning that a lot of our communication became more screen mediated. So anything in our communication, when there's a screen in between us, right? Also, we know through decades of really good research and more recent research related to the pandemic that screens just really are starting to change us at the neurochemical level, but then also at the relational level as well.
When you talk about working with that family and beginning to install some of the basics around relationships and technology and how, like, what did you do with that family, and what are the things that you think were fundamental for them that might have made a positive difference?
The first thing that I really had to focus on was not to locate the problem in one young person in a family. Kids are the thermometer for their family. They're like a temperature gauge, and we know that behavior is communication. So anytime we're seeing really big thoughts, big feelings, big behaviors, that's a clue for us to pop open the hood. It's not a clue for us to pathologize a young person, right? They're interacting with their environment. And so the first step is that assessment. So I reassessed what we're dealing with. Previously, I just sort of been focusing on the assessment of the individual, but then I took a more systems approach and looked at the ways that their family interactions were creating a lot of the reported behaviors, such as distraction. And so from there, I created a model that I call connection crash, which is prominent by the 3D: distraction, disconnection, and distress. And I think that we are seeing across the board heavy use of technology creates various levels of these 3Ds: distraction, disconnection, and distress. And the intervention point at those different levels based on how that shows up in the family system.
So, distraction, distress, and disconnection. Let's walk through each of those and then we'll get into your mesh framework, which I love. Talk to me about digital distraction right now, because I just see everybody bent over their phones. I'm not 100% sure that Steve Jobs, who brought the iPhone into the world many years ago, would be super thrilled about how this has all turned out for us.
I know, I know. The thing that I come back to is that the technology is working. This is what it's designed to do. It is designed to pull us into the phone. And the cost of that is significant, right? And as you referenced my mesh framework, mental, emotional, and social health, it has consequences at all levels. And even beyond that, there's a biological consequence to that too. However, I think the most prominent one that we need to be focusing on is the social health consequences. The number of families I'm speaking with right now about the importance of reintroducing social into the lives of young people is should not be overstated. And that's because all these technologies are designed to pull us away from the things that matter most, right? That's our healthy habits and routines, that's sleep, that's relationships, that's nutrition. It's really impacting all levels of health.
What impact are you seeing on sleep right now?
I think the biggest one that I'm concerned about is that we have a whole generation of kids who, by the way, this is the first generation of kids to go through puberty with a smartphone in their hand. And we're seeing a whole generation of kids who can't go to sleep without a device, who can't fall to sleep without having some form of digital relaxation or digital full regulation, which is a way that they have become really accustomed to, whether that's through music and sleep sounds on Spotify to Netflix shows to binging TikTok at night, right? It's at a really crisis level right now where kids cannot soothe themselves and fall asleep on their own.
Do you think that's true for adults too?
It absolutely is true for adults, Greg. I think that this is in a lot of ways, I go back to again my main premise, which is that the technology works. It is doing exactly what it's designed to do, right? And it's interesting because we can actually map back to the early days of this stuff and see how it started to change. And maybe I can just give you a bit of a high level overview here. From about 2015, we started to see the mental health and social health rates really increase or decrease for significant populations. So I remember over the pandemic, we heard about this adolescent mental health crisis, but it was actually already here long before the pandemic. Around 2010 to 2015 is where those rates started to change significantly. And fascinatingly, I think this is more a correlation than causation at this time, which I'll explain in a moment. But we started to see those trends increase with the rise of technology. So Snapchat, which was introduced in 2011, Instagram in 2012, we started to see some major shifts in the ways that we were socializing. So this was the time, 2010 to 2015, when social media really started to replace social life. Beyond there, that's when it really got a bit of a notch up. And this is when companies figured out, hey, we can actually incentivize people to be here more. And so they noticed through a lot of really important research that they found out that algorithms can start to capture the attention, the sleep, the time, the energy of young people specifically. That's why they're their target audience, which sends the whole family into a frenzy and creates a lot of really disastrous levels of what I call the 3Ds: distraction, disconnection, and distress. And so I think the biggest piece here that we need to really focus on is the ways that algorithms have become a part of our life, such that it has really started to change us at the neurochemical level. Our brains are changed by this. Our relationships are changed by this. And I don't want to be that health expert that's sounding the alarm bells or creating moral panic for no reason. But this problem has long existed pre-pandemic and pre-adolescent mental health crisis. And to your earlier point, this is affecting adults too. And so if the kids can't regulate themselves, it's likely there's a root to that, right? And so as far as I'm concerned, if the adults aren't okay, then the kids just don't stand a chance.
I really notice that when I am digitally distracted, that it's really hard for me to tell my kids not to be digitally distracted. So I'm thinking about putting my life on airplane mode. I'm thinking about how do I go back to living a little bit more analog. My wife is all there. She hates tech. But I use it. Like you and I are having this incredible conversation using technology. There's this incredible ability to connect and to do amazing things, but it's having some significant impacts as well. And you mentioned that our brains are changing, our relationships are changing. What impact is this having on our brain?
So we know that as much as possible, we want to be at the top and the front of our brain, which is known as the prefrontal cortex or the attic of our brain. Typically, what happens when we live a screen-mediated life or we spend way too much time in algorithms or they're making decisions for us, we suffer probably the most disastrous effect of use it or lose it that I can think of. If we're not using the top and the front of our brain, and it pulls us to the bottom of our brainstem, which by nature is more reactive, more impulsive, more emotional, more stress oriented, then we're just spending more time flexing those muscles, right? So I like to think about these as muscles. And the top and the front of our brain, those are the muscles that help us drive forward on performance and goal setting and thinking ahead. And social communication also lives there. Empathy is up there, perspective taking. These really key social and emotional muscles are at the top and the front of our brain. But the incentive of these companies is to keep us operating from our brainstem. There have been some really great researchers. One of them, a prominent advocate, Tristan Harris, calls this the race to the bottom of the brainstem. And that's what these companies are doing, is they're to capture our attention and distract us such that we are not able to access the top and the front of our brain where equal decision making can live and also social communication and attachment also lives as well.
How does that lead into then disconnection? And I was sitting with at a conference recently at a table, and I had two researchers from University of Waterloo there. We were discussing the difference between loneliness and solitude, which they described as loneliness is you're alone not by choice, solitude is that you're alone by choice, but neither of those is actually truly happening, because when you're lonely, you have a phone which kind of tricks you into thinking maybe you're connected, but you're not really connected. So you don't get the signals to re-engage. Similarly, when you're in solitude, you're still connected. Therefore, you're not truly in solitude, and you don't get those benefits. I'd love your thoughts on disconnection and the positives and how these signals are all getting messed up for us right now.
Yeah, let's just create a bit of an equation here. So being alone plus relaxation could equal something like solitude, mindfulness. But being able to be alone is actually a really important protective factor against loneliness, because the equation is also being alone plus distress creates loneliness, right? And so whenever there's a smartphone in our hand, absent of social communication, or we don't have those social inputs such as eye contact, facial expression, being able to be around other people in a shared environment, that creates that low level of distress that constantly ripples beneath the surface. So being alone plus distress will create that loneliness epidemic that we are seeing across the board. And so just as you say, it feels like we're connected, but we're not actually. Scientifically, we know that that is not true.
When you say scientifically we know that that's not true, I'd love to pull on that thread a little bit, because sometimes we're text messaging people, we have a chat group, but it's not the same as getting together in real life. We know how important that is, but I'd love to just break that down and explore that a little bit more, because I think it's a really important factor for us to rebuild in our world right now.
Especially because we are completely redefining what we call social. Um, the companies really smartly called this social media, right? And they gave us this really big promise, this golden promise of you are going to be more connected if you use these apps and these devices. And unfortunately, that isn't in the research. That is not what happened. It has disconnected us and polarized us more than ever before. And so it's a form of connection that is not by nature social or connective. And so I think about some key studies. There was one of the pandemic that found that over Zoom, we are releasing less oxytocin, which is hormone. And so anytime we have screen-mediated communication, we're releasing less oxytocin and therefore not getting access to that really stable, reliable, supportive bonding hormone called oxytocin that we need to be connected and feel connected with each other. I also think about another really important study that found that loneliness literally reshapes the brain and it deteriorates really key regions of the prefrontal cortex. And so it's not just that, we are feeling these things or thinking these things. It is having actual physical brain changes that shows up in brain imaging.
Isn't it amazing that this is rewiring us? This is literally like changing our brains at scale, and our relationships are changing, and that's having a significant impact upon our ability to regulate ourselves. Like, this is a really, really, really curious, powerful impact. I think that, how do you see it changing fundamentally our relationships and our ability to have relationships?
I mean, if we just get some perspective here, humans have been through a lot of really big revolutions and technological changes in our lives, right? So I'm thinking about even the introduction of, let's say, steam and electricity, and even the introduction of computing in the early aughts. We have been through a lot of really important changes, but really smart people, really good researchers are saying this is as if it's a tsunami level of change. This is as if it's fire and the wheel and electricity and steam all happening at once. And that really is AI boom, right? We are being made to sort through a lot of big changes. So if you're a human on this planet right now, you are feeling it. You are absolutely sitting with a lot of discomfort of uncertainty and change. So much so that Amy Webb has also coined this as Gen T. So any human alive today is a part of Gen T. And the T does not stand for technology, it stands for generation transition. We are at a very pivotal moment in terms of our ability to connect with each other. And like you say, it is also changing us biologically and neurobiologically with each other, such that it could also alter the course of evolution because of it.
Talk to me about that, because I've heard people say that this is the beginning of the emergence of an entirely new species where we are actually merging with technology. Like, we all have a phone on our person at all times. You might even have headphones in your ears that are measuring your heart rate. We have wearables now. Talk to me about that potential evolution into a new species, which can be awesome but terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, let's just think about the human body and its functions, right? We, of course, have a brain and a nervous system. The whole job of a nervous system is to turn on and turn off our stress responses. These companies have really expertly figured out how to create a nervous system outside of our body, which is that we have become reliant on technology to do what is already given to us for free from biology. And so, in a lot of ways, we've become dependent on these devices, not because we are just so addicted that we just want to be there. It's almost as if we have to. It's almost as if it is the water and the air that we need to survive, right? It's become, like you say, another limb or another body part that without it, we feel untethered. We don't feel whole.
Have you ever done a digital detox? Like stopped using your technology? Like,
Yes, I have done many. And I do think that I've been through, I've also helped many families and kids also detox from technology too. So we can certainly talk about that. But using my own body and brain as a lab and an experiment site, I usually find that the most successful I can be at detoxing from this stuff is if there's something to replace it. But in this world of hyper, we've just become so reliant and dependent on our devices that they're also vices for us as well, right? So there's no other drug on planet Earth that will do that. That will be the stressor and the soother, the relief and the reward at the exact same time. I strongly believe that these things, again, are designed to do what they do, but they also replace very key muscles and organs in our bodies. And so, in terms of that detox piece, all the research shows that it's about 30 days absent from technology or the specific app that keeps you hooked. So whether that's email, whether that's Twitter/X, whether that's Instagram Reels and TikTok, whether that's YouTube, 30 days off of this stuff gives your brain a break. And that gives enough time for the dopamine receptors in our brain to reset and regenerate. But here's the kicker, is that when we've had too much time on the technology, there is also evidence that shows that it permanently rewires the brain such that we can't go back to it at the same level. Otherwise, it will just reignite that same cycle of addiction.
oh my gosh, so you literally have to replace this with something healthy and keep it going almost like we're never going back here again.
This is a bold claim, but I do think it's true. We have raised a generation of addicts and dependents who these normalized drugs of choice. And so these are digital drugs in a lot of ways. But I think a lot of these companies would have us believe that they're essential because in a lot of ways in the fabric of society, they have become essential, whether it's because our wallet and our money is there, or because our email and our communication with work is there, or because our lifelines are there, right? Like FaceTime and texting with each other. We have really inserted this form of communication such that it has really changed the course of our development.
All right, let's just take a little bit of a break. Let's breathe for a moment so that we can integrate all of this incredible science. And at this point, I'd love for you to share the episode with someone that you know. When you share this information, we all improve. We build a community together where we make the world a better place. So take a moment, pause, breathe, think through what we're learning, and share this with someone who could really benefit from learning this information. About 10 years ago, I said in a talk once when we were discussing this, I mentioned, you know what, I think we're going to look back upon our mobile devices and social media the same way we look back upon cigarettes. Would you agree with that statement? Or like, how was I, like, what do you think?
Yes, and we need to look no further than the litigation that's happening right now. Social media litigation is the new tobacco litigation. We are seeing many companies raising some flags about this, right? I think about MoMA, which is Moms Against Media Addiction. They are the ones that are kind of become the Mothers Against Drunk Driving sort of equivalent. And so they are also raising some really key red flags about the impact of social media addiction and algorithms on the impact of young people. And so I do think that we're seeing some advocacy around this, but we're also seeing some important litigation that's happening too. And I don't think this is going to change until at a legislative level, we see that these companies have some guardrails. And so at present, there are just no guardrails, right? So they are able to do whatever they want without consequence. And the consequences have been pretty catastrophic in my view.
I read a study last week that seemed to indicate that there's a skyrocketing rate of early onset dementia and Alzheimer's in people 30 to 44 years old in our society. Would be interested in, of course, they can't say that it's caused by what we're talking about, but it's an interesting correlation there, or maybe some associations, if you will. But I'd love your thoughts on that. If you're not familiar with the study, that's totally fine. I just think it's curious that this volume of data is now beginning to emerge, showing us that, yeah, this is actually having a real, measurable, catastrophic negative impact on our physiology and our psychology. But just any thoughts from you on that study I happened to see last week?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this also has to do a lot to do with metabolic function, right? And so, anytime there's that mitochondrial stress, mitochondrial dysfunction in the system, there's a really big impact on that. And that is the part of our cells that allows us to keep going and have that energy, right? So, we're seeing this big energy depletion that's occurring, but also not enough of the resources internally to replace or to counteract, right, those effects.
I've got an 11-year-old boy. I've got a 15-year-old girl. So perhaps at this point we can just like dive into a little bit of free Greg Wells family counseling, if you will. And if you had a 15-year-old daughter, what would you be doing right now? Like, what would you be thinking? What would you counsel me to do? And by the way, she's doing really, really well, doesn't like it, sees the problems that her friends are facing as a result of it. I think she's navigating it really, really well. But of course, we're concerned. And I would love your thoughts on, if you had a teenager right now, how would you be handling this?
I think there's many great solutions out there, so I'm happy to that we pivoted towards solutions. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing among young girls, especially at the teen level, I would say that the biggest piece of guidance that I'm giving right now, probably in just like heaping doses, is stop fighting over text message. These are things and conversations place in person. We are seeing an epidemic of people who are not able to sort through real time, real problems in friendship or with their teachers, but they're just doing a lot of it over technology, right? And so, in a lot of ways, technology lowers the bar and makes it easier for kids to have that conversation. Or if it's scripted by ChatGPT, it's easier, right, to solve problems that way. And so, it's such an issue that there's even a coined term for this called fexting, fighting over text message. And we're seeing trying to work out their issues over group chats or on Snapchat or in the DMs on Instagram, trying to sort it out, and they keep coming up with all these issues of why isn't this working? Well, that's because issues are solved in person, and so face-to-face communication, I think, is a really important milestone for young people to work with, right? So if we just think about milestones in general, so this is for girls and boys, but I think that middle school is the time where, of course, academics, we want to get that going. But the most important project of a middle schooler is to work on how to be in groups and how to function in healthy relationships. And so at the 15-year-old level, that's where we can add on the executive functions. That's where we can add on the pieces around thinking ahead and stress management and emotion regulation. But if you don't have the foundation of co-regulation, which happens in relationships, then your upper top of your brain just doesn't stand a chance to get there. And so I think kids, as much as possible, need to be participating in social hobbies. We've seen a big increase in solo hobbies, but kids need to be swimming in a sea of social, and they need to be with other people. So social group needs to be intact. We need to also figure out ways that we can help kids be offline as much as possible. As I was saying, that will not be successful unless there's something to replace it with. So I do think that we are back to a place where adults need to have a heavy hand in being a part of the social lives of young people, not to overschedule or not to force friendships, but to be that person that says you need to be around other people. This is your job right now as a young person, is to be around other people and right, getting into stuff together, right? Whether that's taking risks, whether that's having hard conversations, whether that's sorting through a bit of drama and conflict. But this is the time that they learn those skills. Otherwise, they use it or lose it.
So it's really around not necessarily doing your relational engagements via our devices, but getting out into the world to build these experiences together. Rock climbing, going for a bite to eat, going for coffee, going for a walk, doing something in the real world together might be a really critical thing for all of us to facilitate for ourselves, but especially for our children. I realize it's difficult. People are busy. There's so much going on. So, driving your child to someone's house to hang out is we have to do that type of stuff right now.
Absolutely. I would say the biggest pro of doing so is that it helps them build those muscles that we're talking about. And so kids need real world interactions to build healthy, balanced brains. right? So they need interactions with adults, they need interactions with their peers, people their age, and also doing hard life tasks, right? So having a struggle to overcome is an important milestone for them to be figuring out. And the problem with technology is that it really lowers the bar on what becomes hard. And so in a lot of ways, we're skipping the struggle and we're choosing what's easy and immediate. And so we see a lot of kids now and want everything to be urgent and happen yesterday. And so, in a sense, a lot of this is also about slowing things down and ensuring that they're also getting practice flexing those muscles around things like patience and waiting and delaying the gratification, for example.
I love to hear the words, "I'm so bored," from my kids. So when you're talking about like waiting and doing nothing, like when they say, "Oh, I'm so bored," I'm like, fantastic. That is like the ultimate spark for creativity. And they're like, "I hate my dad," right? So the slowing down piece is so huge.
It is. And I just to translate that into science terms, when we are bored, the default mode network in our brain turns on. And so we need to have the default network in our brain is turned on as much as possible. That helps us with emotion regulation. That helps us with stress management. That also helps us in managing and mitigating distractions as well. And so the problem, as I see it, just from a scientific level, is that we are seeing a lot of kids who don't have enough time and experience with the default mode network in their brain turned on. And so here's how to turn it on. You turn it on by being bored, by waiting, by staring out the window, by taking a nap instead of scrolling on your phone, by slowing life down to a point where your brain can actually learn, I have time to process things. If everything is immediate and everything needs to be impulsive, then I'm also seeing a lot of kids where the default mode network is turned off and the distress is turned on. And so when combination occurs, that also sets kids up for a lot of failure because they don't have the practice of knowing and recognizing this discomfort is not bad. This hard thing is the world. This really challenging test that I'm about to take doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to fail just because I don't know what's going to be on it, for example. So it also allows us to tolerate uncertainty. When we can tolerate uncertainty, then the distraction, disconnection, distress also allows us to falls into place.
So this helps us to navigate feelings of distress, of anxiety, because we exist in a narrow band of experiences in the world. So when we slow down, when we get off our devices, when we engage in the real world, we can be either maybe even a little bit happier and maybe even a little bit more bored, which then opens up the possibility of learning how to regulate our emotions at the highest highs and the lowest lows a little bit better. Am I understanding that correctly?
Brilliant. Absolutely. And I think that it can also be mitigated. And I'm not sure if you want to go here, but we're going to take it there. I do think this is also part of a generational shift in parenting. And I think that we're seeing a big shift towards concierge parenting and snowplow parenting, where we just remove and clear the path for kids and our own distress as adults. We don't want to see our kids in stress or see our kids in struggle. And so then we remove the hurdles, we remove all the speed bumps of life, whether that's emailing the teacher to get them out of something, or whether that's, you know, texting their friends to schedule hangouts for them. We're essentially removing all these discomforting parts of life, but not things that are dangerous, right? So we want to make a distinction between what is uncomfortable and danger, right? So we want to ask ourselves, discomfort or is this danger? When it's danger, that course we want to step in and help and protect them. But if it's just discomfort, we can survive discomfort. And we also want to inspire our kids to be able to do that too. We do that by building that muscle, right? By getting over the hard things. Sometimes we forget that frustration is required for resilience. We need to be able to be frustrated to be able to complete a task and then learn that muscle of resilience, right? To overcome something.
I take my kids swimming with sharks, so clearly I'm missing the danger piece. But we'll park that for a second. A little while ago was thinking, I don't know if I've said this, and I might offend some people by saying it, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Like, kids are not allowed to fail in school anymore. We give them 8th place trophies for everything. We're constantly telling them how amazing they are, and they go to university or high school and they struggle slightly in a quiz, and as a result they experience high levels of anxiety in response to a small stimulus from the environment that may not be entirely comfortable. I think that that's like, of course, thoughts on what I just said, which could be entirely wrong. I may have misinterpreted things. I may have expressed it the wrong way. This is not my expertise, which is why we were talking to you today. But I just look at that. I'm like, well, of course that they're struggling because they're never allowed to fail.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, then we provide accommodations for their perceived failure or any discomfort that they feel in their brain and their body. And so I do think that in a lot of ways we have over accommodated kids to the point where kids just aren't again learning that muscle. But I think the reason why we've done that, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. I think the reason why we've done that is because the bar has really shifted, and we are no longer able to discern, in my view, what is normal, what is healthy development, what we should expect at this age, and what is cause for. And so I'm doing a lot of work with families right now around assessment. That is the first step in my process, is just doing a really good thorough assessment so we can figure out, is this normal problems in living? Is this normal discomfort? Is this normal thoughts and feelings for this age? Or is this cause for concern? And I do think that the line really blurred on that, right? And I do, although controversial, I do think that we have also over-indexed on the mental health terminology, and I think that we have social media for that, right? If everyone is a narcissist, then no one is a narcissist, right? If everyone is ADHD, then this is our normal, right? The bar shifts. And so what I'm thinking about is the ways that we use language to communicate with each other has also been shifted by this really just heavy dose of tech communication that we've had with each other, such that I think it has really messed up a lot of the systems that were already in place. But the challenge is that we don't have any new systems to replace them. And so I think we've created this patchwork system where we've said that, oh yeah, go see a psychologist, get in accommodations, and then everything will be fine. But when over 50% of a class has accommodations, what are we doing? Is that actually helping the people who truly need it? Or are we just simply lowering the bar or changing the entire game altogether? So I think that education, again, has really been affected by this.
Well, it's really, really curious. I'm sensitive to time and how busy you are and how much work you need to do. So I'd love to sort of just get into a few steps that families could take to begin to move the needle towards better mental, emotional, physical health with regards to our relationships with technology. And I also know that you were talking about like AI relationships and other stuff. Like the fact that someone could have a relationship with AI blows my mind. And that's probably worth another episode in and of itself. But what's a step that a family could take for the parents to take, for parents to help their children to take, for teens who might be listening to it? I actually do have a lot of young athletes who listen to this show. Like, what is something that we can do to move ourselves in the right direction right now?
I do think that the healthiest people in the world over the next 10 years and beyond are going to be those who can own their own attention. And so I do think that we, as much as possible, to own our own attention rather than giving it over to the TikTok casino or selling it to these companies for free. And so in an economy, attention is the resource, right? So all these companies are competing for our eyeballs on their screen or on their app. And so in a lot of ways, we need to own our own attention. And that means that we have to change our relationship with technology if we want it to change. And a lot of ways that is becoming complicated for the modern parents because kids have really brilliant marketing schemes to get access to Snapchat, to get access to the newest iPhone, right? Because in a lot of ways, it has also become the Louis Vuitton bag for the generation, right? They want to be seen holding the device. They want to be able to tell people, yes, I have Snapchat. They want to be able to go next day and say, I was on TikTok last night. Did you see that funny video? And so it is a currency that we shouldn't ignore, but it is one that should require regulation. And I think that also should be in the home as well. So here are my go-tos. No phones in bedrooms after 10 p.m. I think that 10 p.m. is digital dark. There are also some industry whispers that the algorithm gets a bit of a notch up after 10 p.m. So phones out of bedrooms for sure after 10 p.m. And in a lot of ways, from an age and stage appropriate approach, we need to give really careful consideration to the time and when kids have access to a smartphone or specific apps. And so for parents who are listening, you may be thinking, oh, the horse is already out of the barn. They already have the iPhone or they already have Snapchat. But I also just want to remind us that you are the leader of your family, right? So you get to change your decision. You get to re-update your approach, right? So that means that even after listening to a podcast like this, you get to change your mind. If you're the pilot of a plane and you learn about a danger in your destination, you're going to reroute the plane, right? And so with new information, give yourself permission to change your mind and say, you know what, we tried the Snapchat thing and it didn't work. We can try again, or we can try again in the new year, right? I think it's okay that in this age of modern parenting, parents are really struggling. They feel like they have to be all in or all out. And I do think that there is ways you can run experiments with technology just to see if they can handle it. And as far as I'm concerned, if they can handle it, then you don't have a problem. So we don't want to create problems where they don't exist. And we shouldn't just give in to sort of the moral panic of technology because it's here to stay. And we have to find a way to live with it. But I do have some hard guidelines if you're interested in them. I do think we need to keep kids off of technology and out of algorithms for more than 2 hours per day. There's a lot of research that shows that over 4 hours in an algorithm per day can show up as mental health and attention problems. So, as much as possible, we need to keep kids out of the deep end of technology and they need our help. I have many kids who are coming into my practice saying, Jake, I need my parents to put screen time rules and they don't know how. And so I'm getting kids coming to me asking to teach their parents how to put these things in place because kids know that it's a problem, but they can't do it on their own. So they need the adult in the room to give them those guidelines and to set those guardrails for them. A way to do that, I think, is to really get a high level view on their screen time. If they are spending too much time on technology, they need to spend time in the real world, right? And so it's hard to be the heavy parent, but you have to come in. And I think introducing that boundary for them is also really important mental health care.
Checking your screen time is sobering. When you use that function on your phone, you're like, how much time am I actually spending on my device? You're like, oh wow, it's a lot more than I thought. And apparently I do have 20 minutes to go to the gym and do a little workout because I'm wasting an astronomical amount of time on my phone. And I'm sure that a lot of people would be quite blown away if they looked at their child's phones and saw how much time they're actually spending on these devices.
Oh, absolutely. I think the first thing I say to parents is we have to start at home first. We have to make sure that it's okay inside the house. And so if your screen time is off, or if you are having problems with technology, then kids aren't going to be able to do that by themselves, right? Just simply for the fact that they're a kid and you're an adult. And so we do have to be the adult in the room and model and show the behavior that we want to see.
Is there, last question for you, and then we'll ask a little bit about the upcoming book, but is there a practice that you have found that really helps people to relearn emotional regulation, to rewire the brain, to improve our mental health? Like my mind goes to mindfulness and meditation, but maybe there's something else that you're practicing. It could be reading a real fiction book, like an actual book. Is there anything that you're seeing as being a practice that is almost like a healing balm on the brain for all of the things that we're experiencing right now?
Yeah, it's got to be about digital hygiene. I think any practice that you can implement in order to have more digital hygiene in your life, we are in an age where it will become normal for us to take time away from social media or technology, and that shouldn't be a problem. But we have a generation full of kids who have grown up on this stuff, and so we're gonna have to, just like other drugs or other substances that we become dependent on, figure out what we want a relationship with it to be. And as far as I'm concerned, if active and pro-social, then it is all systems go, and that is what I call the green zone. But anytime an algorithm is in our attention or changing our decision making, that is where I would say that we need a closer look. So we need to look at the ways that algorithms are making our choices for us. There's a big difference between going on Instagram and typing something in because you want to view those videos and just letting an algorithm take you away, right? Because there are no stopping cues. That will be a bottomless well of scrolling. And so, as much as possible, if we can search out that content, so that's an active way to use social media, that would be a good practice and a good digital hygiene habit, I would say.
Jake Ernst, tell us about the dream for the book that you're crafting at the moment. You and I both share the same publisher, the same editor. I'm excited. I know it's way early, and whatever we talk about won't be the thing, but I know people are interested in it. When they follow you, hopefully they'll see it soon. But what are you thinking for your book?
I am writing about the ways that technology is changing our relationships and affecting something that we call co-regulation. So, co-regulation is our ability to be person to person, human to human with each other to achieve that state of regulation. That is the foundation of the relationship house that we're building. And if we don't have co-regulation available, then all attempts at self-regulation is a survival response. So, any inability to regulate ourselves, we typically try to outsource that. And I do think that in a lot of ways, this generation and adults included have outsourced that to technology. As I was saying at the beginning, it has become our primary attachment figure. And so it's replacing our ability to co-regulate. So the book I'm writing is about what skills are being lost to technology and how can we also replace them, purely from sort of a social, emotional, and mental health muscle analogy.
Can't wait to read it. Jake Ernst, thank you so much for joining us for this show and your insights, the clarity, taking a stand and actually letting us know for real what's happening, basing everything in science, which I love. So I'm so deeply appreciative. I know everyone listening right now is really going to benefit from this. So thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us today.
Thank you for having me, Greg. Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Hey everyone, I hope that you found that episode with Jake Ernst helpful. I know I did. I got to ask all the questions that I've wanted to know about how do I navigate social media with my kids in an era when things just seem to be going off the rails completely. I really appreciated Jake's candor, frankly, about what's going on. And I feel like that gives me confidence about how I can move forwards with my own family. I hope that it does that for you as well. Please follow Jake on social. He's amazing. He puts out great content. If you found this episode helpful, please share it widely. Everyone needs help navigating this social media world that we live in, especially if they have kids. So if you think this might be helpful for someone, please send it to them. That would mean the world to all of us. If you have any questions for me, ping me on social at Dr. Greg Wells. And if this episode was helpful, if you can leave us a review, that just helps out so much. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Thank you for investing in yourself and your family by still being here. It really is meaningful to me that you're here at this point because it means that you're committed. It means that you're doing great things for yourself and the people that you love. So please keep that up. I really, really appreciate you making the world a better place. All right, everyone, thank you so much. And we'll see you in the next video. All right, everyone, hope you enjoyed that session. This is a little note from the lawyers. This podcast and video contains advice and information relating to health and wellness and is presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes. We've made enormous efforts to make sure that the information is accurate and that what we've contained in this episode is based on science and research. However, it should still only be used as a supplement rather than to replace the advice of your doctor or other qualified healthcare professional. If you know or suspect that you have a health problem, it's recommended that you seek your qualified healthcare professional's advice before embarking on any program, treatment, or protocol. All right, thanks for listening in. Really appreciate you. We'll see you in the next video, session, or podcast.